Chapter 1. The Christmas I Thought I Still Belonged. I thought Christmas was about loyalty until my best friend erased me from my own work, rewrote the story, and told the world I was unstable. I didn't scream, I didn't expose her, I disappeared instead. This is Elowin, and what happened after that Christmas wasn't revenge in the way people expect. It was karma unfolding quietly, professionally, and in ways no apology could ever fix. My name is Elowin Pierce, and I was 42 when I finally admitted the truth to myself. I had been living like a guest in my own life for years, smiling at the right moments, offering help before anyone asked, fixing what other people broke, and calling it love. December in Westport, Connecticut always looked like a movie set. White lights wrapped around bare trees, wreaths on every door, storefront windows dressed in velvet and pine. You could walk down Post Road and feel as if the whole town had agreed to pretend nothing ugly ever happened here. That year, early December 2023, I tried to let the season pull me in. I tried to believe that I still belonged somewhere. For the first time in a long time, I told myself I was not going to spend the holidays behind the curtain. I was not going to be the woman who stayed late to save someone else's deadline, or the one who rewrote a pitch deck at midnight so another person could take a bow in the morning. I did not say it out loud to anyone. I just made small decisions that felt like rebellion. I declined a last-minute client call. I left my laptop closed on the couch. I bought myself a real tree instead of the cheap little tabletop one I usually settled for. Because it was easier to keep life small when you were afraid of being disappointed. Lydia Camden had been my closest friend since we were 19. We met in a cramped dorm lounge at Northeastern, both of us pretending we were fine, both of us hungry for a life that looked softer than the one we came from. 18 years later, she was the kind of woman people took pictures of on purpose. She had the perfect blowout, the perfect coat, the perfect laugh that made strangers feel chosen. She planned charity galas and holiday events that ended up in glossy local magazines. Then she posted the behind-the-scenes reels like she was letting the world in on a secret. Everyone called her radiant. Everyone called her generous. I used to call her family. I had helped her build that life. I do not mean in the vague, supportive way people say it about their friends. I mean I built the bones of it with my own hands. I was a creative director and brand consultant, technically independent, but in truth, I had been Lydia's invisible partner for years. I wrote her proposals, I designed her decks, I negotiated with vendors when she did not want to be the bad guy. I walked into rooms ahead of her and made sure the lighting was right and the story made sense. I told myself it was normal. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was what you did when you were loyal. That was the thing about me. I could call it professionalism, but it started long before work. My mother, Kathleen, believed peace was something you earned by shrinking. She would smooth her voice when my father got quiet and the air changed in the kitchen. She would press her fingers to my wrist and whisper, "Just let it go, honey," like letting go was a virtue. My dad, Raymond, never yelled. He just withdrew. He could make you feel guilty without saying a word. I learned early that the safest way to be loved was to be useful and easy. I learned how to swallow my own needs until they stopped making noise. So when Lydia called and asked me to come over to help decorate for her holiday party, I said yes without thinking. It was a Tuesday night, cold enough that your breath came out in little clouds. Her house smelled like cinnamon and fresh garland. The living room was already glowing, a tall tree in the corner, twinkle lights running up the banister, stacks of ornament boxes arranged like she had an assistant on payroll. Lydia did, of course, but she still wanted me. She always wanted me, right up until she did not. "You are a lifesaver," she said, fluttering around in cream sweater and jeans that probably cost more than my first car. "I have a million things to do, and you just make it all feel possible." I laughed because that is what I did. I took off my coat, I rolled up my sleeves, I started untangling strings of lights with the kind of focus you save for problems you can actually solve. Lydia danced around the room with her phone, filming a quick clip of the tree and the fireplace, the little bowls of dried oranges she always had out for scent and aesthetic. She held the phone up toward us for a half second, then turned it back to herself. "Say hi," she said, cheerful, effortless. I lifted 2 fingers in a small wave, not because I wanted to be on camera, but because it felt easier than saying no. An hour in, she stepped into the kitchen to take a call. I could hear her voice drifting back, soft and bright, the tone she used when she wanted someone to feel special. I stayed in the living room, arranging ornaments by color, the quiet work of making something look like it belonged together. Her laptop sat open on the dining table, screen facing the room, the way people leave things when they don't believe they have anything to hide. I wasn't snooping. I was walking past with a box of ornaments in my hands when I saw my own name on the screen. "Elowen is too emotionally involved. We'll replace her quietly." I stopped so fast that the ornaments clinked to each other. For a moment, I thought I had misread it. My eyes went back, scanning the lines like they might rearrange themselves into something kinder. The email thread was from a major client, the board chair for the Holiday Hope Gala, one of the biggest charity events in Fairfield County. I knew the event. I had created the original concept in late October when Lydia came to me in a panic because the board wanted a fresh theme, something heartfelt but modern, something that would make donors open their wallets without feeling manipulated. I stayed up till 2 a.m. sketching it out, building a narrative arc for the night, figuring out how to make the room feel like warmth and meaning. On the screen now, the client's message sat above Lydia's neat reply. Lydia had written back weeks earlier, professional and smooth. She agreed that I had become too close to the story. She said it might be better for the brand if she handled the creative direction personally going forward. She attached a draft contract with a different consultant's name, someone younger, someone I didn't recognize. The draft was dated mid-November. Mid-November? My stomach went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather outside. I stood there, staring at the date, doing the math in my head. For weeks, I had been sending Lydia ideas, revisions, vendor contacts, like a fool, happily sewing my own replacement into the lining of her coat. She had taken everything and already decided I was a liability. My hand tightened around the ornament box until the cardboard bent. I could hear Lydia laughing in the kitchen, the sound light and careless, like there was nothing in the world that could touch her. I wanted to step into that kitchen and ask her why. I wanted to demand she look at me and say my name like it mattered. I wanted to say, "You used me." I wanted to say, "I trusted you." Instead, I stood there and felt the old instinct rise up, the one my mother trained into me. Keep it calm, don't ruin the moment, don't make it messy, don't be the problem. Lydia came back into the living room, phone in hand, smile still on her face. "You wouldn't believe how needy people get in December," she said, rolling her eyes like the whole world was an inconvenience. I made my voice work. "Holiday season," I said, like it was a joke we both understood. She walked over to the dining table, glanced at the laptop, and without thinking, she clicked the screen dark. Her fingers moved with casual certainty of someone shutting a door. "You okay?" she asked, not looking at me, already reaching for a ribbon spool. I nodded. I could feel my throat trying to close, and I swallowed hard. "Just tired," I said. She hummed, satisfied with that answer. "Drink some water, you always forget." I went to the kitchen sink and let the faucet run a little longer than needed. The water was cold, loud in the quiet house. I drank from my hands and stared at the window over the sink, at the reflection of the tree lights behind me. My eyes looked normal, my face looked normal. I wondered how many times I had been smiling when someone quietly rewrote my place in their life. Back in the living room, Lydia handed me a string of beads and asked my opinion on which ornaments would photograph better. I gave her the answer she wanted. I placed the beads carefully. I adjusted the lights. My body moved on autopilot, trained by years of being useful even when I was breaking. When I finally left her house, my car was dusted with a thin layer of snow. I sat in the driver's seat for a long minute with my hands on the steering wheel, not turning the key. The neighborhood was silent, every house glowing with warm windows and perfect wreaths. Somewhere down the street, someone's inflatable Santa wobbled in the wind, cheerful and ridiculous. I drove home slowly, as if going too fast might make the truth catch up to me. In my apartment, my own tree stood in the corner, still half undecorated, the lights blinking patiently like they were waiting for me to decide what kind of season this was going to be. I set my coat on the chair. I did not turn on the television. I did not call anyone. I just stood there, looking at that tree, at the empty spaces where the ornaments should have been, and something in me finally whispered what I had been afraid to say. Maybe the belonging I was trying to hold on to had never been really mine. Chapter 2. Betrayal doesn't shout, it erases. The week after I left Lydia's house, the town kept sparkling like nothing had happened, and I moved through it like someone trying not to wake a sleeping animal. I told myself it was just a misunderstanding, that the words on that screen had been a rough draft, an awkward client comment Lydia would correct later. That was the story I offered my own mind, because the alternative was too sharp to hold. I texted her the next morning with something harmless. Coffee later this week. Her reply came hours later. So busy, babe. Let me circle back. The pet name felt like a sweater pulled over a bruise. I tried again 2 days later, a simple question about a vendor deposit I knew was due. She answered with one line, handled. Handled by who, I wanted to ask. Handled how? Instead, I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed, then I slipped it into my pocket like it was my fault for wanting clarity. By mid-December, the erasing stopped feeling accidental. It became a rhythm. A meeting I used to attend as Lydia's quiet anchor would show up on my calendar from a client, then disappear with no explanation. A florist I had worked with for years called me by mistake, cheerful at first, then confused. "Hey, Eloin, are we still doing the winterberry installation for the gala?" she asked. I paused in the grocery store aisle, my hand hovering over a box of tea. "Which gala?" "The Holiday Hope Gala," she said. Then her voice dropped like she'd realized she'd said something she was not supposed to. "Oh, sorry. Lydia told me to route everything through her now. She said you were taking time off." "Time off?" I repeated, tasting the words. "Yeah," the florist said gently. "I assumed it was a nice thing. December is insane." I heard a cartwheel squeak somewhere behind me. I swallowed. "It's fine," I said. "Thanks for letting me know." When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not dramatically, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough that I had to grip the shelf for a second. Taking time off was a kind way to say I had been removed. It was also a way to make it sound like my absence had been my choice. That night, I opened my laptop at my kitchen table and forced myself to check the basics. Emails, calendars, shared folders, the little systems I had built over years so Lydia's world could look effortless. I found new permissions, new names added, my access quietly reduced in places I had once been the administrator. Someone had been cleaning up the trail of my usefulness. 2 days later, an email arrived that made my stomach drop in a different way, because it did not pretend to be kind. Subject line: Holiday Hope Gala Update. The sender was not Lydia. It was her husband, Grant Camden. He was 46 and had the kind of steady, polished career that made people listen when he spoke. Real estate development, commercial projects, board connections, donor circles. He was the quiet power behind Lydia's shine, the man who could make a phone call and turn a maybe into a yes. I opened the email and read it twice. Eloin, the project scope has been restructured. We are moving forward with a consolidated team. Your involvement is no longer required. Please direct any outstanding materials to Lydia by end of day tomorrow. Best, Grant. No greeting beyond my name, no warmth, no thanks for years of unpaid rescue work, just a corporate dismissal disguised as efficiency. I sat there staring at the words, feeling something hot rise in my chest and then cool into a hard, quiet ache. I called Lydia, straight to voicemail. I called again, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Can we talk today? It's important." An hour passed, two. Finally, a message appeared. "I'm in back-to-back meetings. Everything's fine. We can talk after the holidays." After the holidays, like my life was something you could postpone. I did not scream. I did not send paragraphs. I did what I had trained myself to do for years. I stayed calm on the outside and began collecting facts on the inside. I forwarded Grant's email to a folder I labeled December. I downloaded the attachments I still had access to. I saved screenshots of permission changes before they could vanish. The actions were small, almost boring, but they gave my hands something to do besides tremble. Still, part of me needed to see it in real life to confirm I was not losing my mind. So when I got a calendar reminder from months earlier that said venue walkthrough, I drove to the site anyway. The Holiday Hope Gala was being held at a restored waterfront space in South Norwalk, all glass and exposed beams, the kind of place that made donors feel modern and generous. I had been there a dozen times. I knew where the loading dock was. I knew which corner always needed extra lighting. I knew how the sound echoed if the stage was placed wrong. I parked, took a breath, and walked in with a clipboard and my coat buttoned to my chin. At the front entrance, a security guard stepped in my path. Late 40s, polite face, earpiece, the calm stance of someone used to saying no. "Morning, ma'am. Vendor check-in is around back." I smiled because that was my reflex. "I'm not a vendor. I'm with the event team, Elo and Pierce." He looked at a tablet, his brows pulled together slightly. "I don't have you on the list." "That's strange," I said, keeping my voice even. "I've been on this project since October." He scrolled again, slower. "I'm sorry, I have Lydia Camden, Grant Camden, and a few staff names. No Eloin." I felt the room tilt just a fraction. My mouth went dry. "Can you call Lydia?" I asked. He tacked his earpiece. "Lydia, security at front. There's a woman here, Eloin Pierce. Says she's with the team." I stood still, hearing my own heartbeat in the quiet lobby. A few feet away, workers carried in boxes of linens. Someone laughed. It was ordinary, and that made it worse. The guard listened, then nodded. He lowered his hand and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy or might have been irritation at being put in the middle. "She says she's tied up and can't come out. She asked me to email her assistant." I blinked. "Tell her I'm right here," I said softly. "Just tell her I'm standing at the door." He hesitated, then relayed it. He listened again. His face stayed neutral, but his eyes flicked away from mine. "She says she'll reach out later," he said. Later, always later, like I was a task she could push down the list. I did not scream. I did not send paragraphs. I did what I had trained myself to do for years. I stayed calm on the outside and began collecting facts. I forwarded Grant's email to a folder I labeled December. I downloaded the attachments I still had access to. I saved screenshots of permission changes before they could vanish. The actions were small, almost boring, but they gave my hands something to do besides tremble. Still, part of me needed to see it in real life to confirm I was not losing my mind. So when I got a calendar reminder from months earlier that said venue walkthrough, I drove to the site anyway. The Holiday Hope Gala was being held at a restored waterfront space in South Norwalk, all glass and exposed beams, the kind of place that made donors feel modern and generous. I had been there a dozen times. I knew where the loading dock was. I knew which corner always needed extra lighting. I knew how the sound echoed if the stage was placed wrong. I parked, took a breath, and walked in with a clipboard and my coat buttoned to my chin. At the front entrance, a security guard stepped in my path. Late 40s, polite face, earpiece, the calm stance of someone used to saying no. "Morning, ma'am. Vendor check-in is around back." I smiled because that was my reflex. "I'm not a vendor. I'm with the event team, Elo and Pierce." He looked at a tablet, his brows pulled together slightly. "I don't have you on the list." "That's strange," I said, keeping my voice even. "I've been on this project since October." He scrolled again, slower. I'm sorry, I have Lydia Camden, Grant Camden, and a few staff names. No Eloin. I felt the room tilt just a fraction. My mouth went dry. Can you call Lydia? I asked. He tapped his earpiece. Lydia, security at front. There's a woman here, Eloin Pierce. Says she's with the team. I stood still, hearing my own heartbeat in the quiet lobby. A few feet away, workers carried in boxes of linens. Someone laughed. It was ordinary, and that made it worse. The guard listened, then nodded. He lowered his hand and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy or might have been irritation at being put in the middle. She says she's tied up and can't come out. She asked me to email her assistant. I blinked. Tell her I'm right here, I said softly. Just tell her I'm standing at the door. He hesitated, then relayed it. He listened again. His face stayed neutral, but his eyes flicked away from mine. She says she'll reach out later, he said. Later, always later, like I was a task she could push down the list. I did not scream. I did not send paragraphs. I did what I had trained myself to do for years. I stayed calm on the outside and began collecting facts. I forwarded Grant's email to a folder I labeled December. I downloaded the attachments I still had access to. I saved screenshots of permission changes before they could vanish. The actions were small, almost boring, but they gave my hands something to do besides tremble. Still, part of me needed to see it in real life to confirm I was not losing my mind. So when I got a calendar reminder from months earlier that said venue walkthrough, I drove to the site anyway. The Holiday Hope Gala was being held at a restored waterfront space in South Norwalk, all glass and exposed beams, the kind of place that made donors feel modern and generous. I had been there a dozen times. I knew where the loading dock was. I knew which corner always needed extra lighting. I knew how the sound echoed if the stage was placed wrong. I parked, took a breath, and walked in with a clipboard and my coat buttoned to my chin. At the front entrance, a security guard stepped in my path. Late 40s, polite face, earpiece, the calm stance of someone used to saying no. Morning, ma'am. Vendor check-in is around back. I smiled because that was my reflex. I'm not a vendor. I'm with the event team, Eloin Pierce. He looked at a tablet, his brows pulled together slightly. I don't have you on the list. That's strange, I said, keeping my voice even. I've been on this project since October. He scrolled again, slower. I'm sorry, I have Lydia Camden, Grant Camden, and a few staff names. No Eloin. I felt the room tilt, just a fraction. My mouth went dry. Can you call Lydia? I asked. He tapped his earpiece. Lydia? Security at front. There's a woman here, Eloin Pierce, says she's with the team. I stood still, hearing my own heartbeat in the quiet lobby. A few feet away, workers carried in boxes of linens. Someone laughed. It was ordinary, and that made it worse. The guard listened, then nodded. He lowered his hand and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy or might have been irritation at being put in the middle. She says she's tied up and can't come out, he said. She asked me to tell her to email her assistant. I blinked. Tell her I'm right here, I said softly. Just tell her I'm standing at the door. He hesitated, then relayed it. He listened again. His face stayed neutral, but his eyes flicked away from mine. She says she'll reach out later, he said. Later. Always later, like I was a task she could push down the list. I nodded once, because pride is a strange thing. It shows up when you have nothing else left. I stepped back toward the door. The cold air hit my cheeks like a slap. I walked to my car without running, without looking around to see who might have watched. In the driver's seat, my hands finally shook hard enough that my keys rattled. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel for a moment. I did not cry. Not yet. Tears would have meant I still believed there was something to negotiate. I drove straight to Lydia's house. Her driveway was full. 2 cars I recognized from her social circle. The women who always looked polished even in leggings. The women who called each other babe and meant it as a currency. I stood at the front door and rang the bell. A minute later, Lydia opened it just enough to keep the cold out. She was wearing a sweater the color of cream, hair perfect, cheeks flushed like she had been laughing. "Elowen," she said, blinking like I was unexpected. "What are you doing here?" My voice surprised me with how steady it was. "I went to the venue. Security told me I'm not on the list." Lydia's smile tightened. "Oh, that. We made some changes." "Grant emailed me," I said. "He said my involvement is no longer required." She exhaled, like I was being inconvenient. "I told you we'd talk after the holidays." "No," I said. "We're talking now. I deserve that." Her eyes flicked toward the living room behind her, where someone's laughter floated out, light and careless. She stepped onto the porch and pulled the door mostly closed behind her. "You're making this bigger than it is," she said quietly. "Things evolve. You've been so intense lately." "Intense," I repeated. "I did the work. I built the pitch." "And you did it beautifully," she said. Soft voice, practiced kindness. "But you get emotionally attached. Clients can feel that. It's messy." "Messy," I said. "What's messy is cutting me out and pretending it's my choice." Her face changed then, the warmth draining. She tilted her head, eyes cool. "People have been concerned, Elowen. You've seemed, I don't know, unsteady, and I can't have that around my brand, around my life." Unsteady. The word landed in my chest like a stone. It was not an accident. It was a label, a story she was already telling. "Who is people?" I asked. She lifted one shoulder. "Vendors, a client, friends. Maybe they're just picking up on your energy." "My energy," I repeated, and something in me almost laughed. I had spent years managing her energy, smoothing her panic, absorbing her chaos, and now she was calling me unstable like it was a public service. I looked past her, at the glow of her living room, the perfect scene, the women who would nod along if Lydia framed me the right way. I realized then that the fight I wanted, the confrontation where she apologized and I got my friend back, did not exist. I took a slow breath. "Okay," I said. Lydia blinked. "Okay?" "Yes," I said, and my voice was quiet. "I understand." She relaxed a fraction, as if she thought she had won. "Good. I knew you'd get it." I nodded once, then I turned and walked back to my car. That night, Christmas Eve, I sat alone in my apartment, with the lights off except for the tree. The ornaments I had placed carefully caught the glow and threw it back in small, fractured reflections. I listened to the radiator click and the distant sound of neighbors coming and going, carrying food, carrying laughter, carrying belonging. I opened Grant's email again, just to make sure it was real. I opened my folder of saved screenshots, proof. Not because I planned revenge yet, not because I wanted to destroy anyone, but because I needed something solid in a world where I was being rewritten. On the table beside me, my phone stayed silent. No apology, no explanation, no missed call that said she had panicked and made a mistake. Only the quiet certainty settling into place, heavy and clear, that I was not being pushed out because I lacked talent. I was being pushed out because I had made it easy to be erased. Chapter 3. I didn't fight. I withdrew. It was clarity. Not relief, not peace, not even anger. Just a clean, steady understanding that settled in my chest and stayed there. Christmas morning came and went quietly. I did not post anything. I did not explain myself to anyone. I did not send a single message asking for closure. I let the silence do what it had never done for me before. It created space. The town slowed after the holidays the way it always did, like everyone needed a collective exhale. I stayed home more than usual. I made coffee and drank it at the table instead of rushing out the door. I put my phone face down. When my hands started to itch for distraction, I gave them something real to do. I opened my laptop and began pulling everything into one place. Emails first. Years of threads, attachments, late-night revisions. I searched my name and watched the screen fill. Pitch decks, creative outlines, budget drafts, subject lines that said lifesaver and thank you and could you take a look at this one more thing? I saved them all. Then invoices, some paid, some not. Then proposals I had written entirely on my own, sent from Lydia's account, signed with her name. The pattern emerged slowly, then all at once. Concepts I remembered building from scratch now lived in folders labeled Lydia Originals. A winter theme I had developed for a regional nonprofit appeared in a portfolio file with my name nowhere near it. I felt something tighten behind my eyes, but I kept going. This was not the time for collapse. This was the time for accuracy. One document stopped me cold. It was a contract draft, buried in an old shared folder I still had partial access to. The file name was bland, something like Client Services Agreement Final. I opened it and scrolled, my heart picking up speed with every line. There it was, the language that turned my stomach. Work for hire, ownership assigned in perpetuity, NDA clauses that would have silenced me completely if I had signed it. I knew I had never signed it. I would have remembered agreeing to terms like that. I scrolled to the signature page. Lydia's name was there. The client's signature was there. Mine was not. But the effective date was mid-November, weeks before I saw the email at her house. She had been building a legal shield while I was still fixing her problems out of loyalty. I closed the document and leaned back in my chair. My apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to make me uneasy. Now it felt like protection. I stared at the ceiling for a long minute, letting the weight of it all settle. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a messy friendship. This was strategy. A few days later, a small project came across my inbox, something modest and unrelated to Lydia's world. A regional nonprofit needed help cleaning up their messaging for a spring fundraiser. I almost turned it down out of habit, out of exhaustion. Instead, I said yes. That was how I met Nina Alvarez. We spoke on a video call first. She had dark hair pulled back, glasses perched low on her nose, the calm presence of someone who had seen too much chaos to be impressed by it. She listened while I explained the scope, nodding occasionally, asking practical questions. At the end, she tilted her head slightly. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure," I replied. "Do you keep receipts?" The word landed differently than Lydia's labels had. It was not an accusation, it was a tool. "I keep everything," I said carefully. "Good," Nina said. "Not everyone does, especially women who are taught to smooth things over." Something in my chest loosened. We worked well together, clean, efficient, no drama. When the project wrapped, Nina asked if I had time for coffee. I hesitated, then agreed. We met at a small place near the train station, the kind of cafe that smelled like espresso and wet coats. I told her the short version, the professional version. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she wrapped her hands around her mug and looked at me. "What you're describing isn't just betrayal," she said. "It's risk, reputational and legal." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. "I used a contract I never signed," I said. "Does that even count?" "It counts that she tried," Nina replied, "and it counts that you have proof you did not agree. Silence is not consent, no matter how much people wish it were." I thought of all the times I had gone quiet to keep the peace. "What do I do?" I asked. "You do nothing loud," she said. "You organize, you protect yourself, you stop giving her access to anything that belongs to you." That night, I made a list. Accounts to secure, contacts to update, shared folders to revoke. It felt strange drawing boundaries so late, like learning a new language in middle age. But with every small action, my shoulders dropped a little lower. Still, the old voices did not disappear easily. My mother called an evening while I was sorting files. "I heard you and Lydia aren't talking," she said gently. "We aren't," I replied. "That's a shame," she said. "You two were like sisters. Maybe this is one of those things you let go for your own peace?" I closed my eyes. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "letting go is what I've been doing my whole life." She was quiet for a moment. "I just don't want you carrying bitterness," she said. "I'm not bitter," I said. "I'm being careful." She sighed, the sound familiar and heavy. Sometimes being careful looks a lot like holding a grudge to people who benefit from your silence. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone. The urge to apologize rose in me, reflexive and strong. I let it pass. A week later, Nina introduced me to Jonah Reed. He worked in ethics and human resources consulting, the kind of person companies called when something had already gone wrong and they wanted to understand how. We met in his office, a clean space with neutral art and a view of the river. He listened to my story the way Nina had, without judgment, without rushing to conclusions. At the end, he tilted his head slightly. "You didn't fight, you withdrew," he said. "Yes, I didn't have the energy to do anything else." "That wasn't weakness," he said. "That was instinct. The problem is you were taught to withdraw without strategy." I frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means silence is only useful if you're also building leverage," he said. "Otherwise, it's just erasure with better manners." The words hit home. "What would leverage look like?" I asked. "Documentation," he said. "Witnesses, clean exits, and boundaries you enforce even when it's uncomfortable." I thought of Lydia's porch, her calm voice telling me I was unsteady. "I'm done being comfortable for other people," I said. "Good," Jonah replied. "Then you're already ahead." I did not reach out to Lydia again. I did not warn her. I did not correct the story she was telling. Instead, I focused on rebuilding the parts of my work that had always been mine, quietly reconnecting with clients who remembered me for more than my usefulness. Some replied immediately, some did not. I accepted both without taking it as a verdict on my worth. Late one night, weeks after Christmas, I sat at my desk with everything neatly organized, folders labeled, timelines clear. The chaos had been reduced to facts. It no longer felt personal in the way it once had. It felt instructive. I realized then that the sharpest pain was no longer about losing Lydia. It was about recognizing how long I had confused self-erasure with loyalty, how often I had believed being quiet was the same as being loved. I closed my laptop and leaned back, the room dim except for the soft glow of a lamp. Outside, the town moved on. Inside, something had shifted for good. I had not fought. I had withdrawn, and for the first time, that choice felt like the beginning of my own voice returning, steady and unafraid, waiting for the right moment to be heard. Chapter 4. When Karma Arrives Without Apology. Enough did not mean safe. It meant I could finally stand still without bracing for impact. January in Connecticut stripped everything down to its bones. The decorations disappeared, the streets turned gray. People stopped pretending December had been kind to them. Work slowed into something quieter, more honest. Projects came without fanfare, without urgency, without Lydia's name attached to them. I welcomed the silence. The first sign that things were shifting did not come from Lydia. It came from someone who sounded tired. My phone buzzed one afternoon while I was reviewing notes at my desk. "Elowen, it's Marcy from Bloomline Floral. I hope it's okay that I'm calling." Her voice was careful, already apologizing. "Of course," I said. "What's going on?" She hesitated. "It's Lydia. She's behind on payments. She keeps changing the designs after approvals, and when I ask who's signing off creatively, she says the team is unavailable." Unavailable. The word sat heavy between us. "I'm not involved anymore," I said gently. "I know," Marcy replied. "I just needed to hear that out loud. Something feels off." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. I did not feel satisfaction. I felt grief. Not for Lydia, but for the version of myself who used to rush in and fix things like this before anyone could notice the cracks. Over the next few weeks, similar messages reached me in quiet ways. A lighting vendor forwarded an email thread by mistake, full of polite frustration and missed deadlines. A junior coordinator asked if I was available for overflow support because things were getting disorganized. The same words surfaced again and again. Unclear, reactive, stressful. The chaos I used to absorb had nowhere to land. In early February, Nina invited me to an industry networking event in New York. "You don't have to prove anything," she said over the phone. "Just show up." I almost said no out of habit. Instead, I said yes. The event was held in a midtown hotel ballroom, all warm lighting and quiet conversations layered over soft music. It was the kind of room Lydia once dominated effortlessly. When I walked in, I felt the old reflex tighten in my chest, the urge to scan faces, to measure myself against imagined judgments. I took a breath and let it pass. Nina introduced me simply. "This is Elowen Pierce. She works in strategy and creative direction." No qualifiers, no explanations. People listened when I spoke. They asked thoughtful questions. Nothing dramatic happened, and that was the point. Then I saw Lydia. She stood near the bar, posture perfect, smile in place. But something about her was different. The ease was gone. Her laugh arrived a second too late, like she was remembering when to deploy it. When her eyes met mine, the smile stayed, but the warmth drained away. She turned back to her conversation without coming over. "Do you want to leave?" Nina asked quietly. "No," I said. "I'm okay." A few minutes later, a woman approached us with calm authority. "Elowen Pierce," she said. "I'm Camille Dawson. I sit on the board for Holiday Hope." The room seemed to quiet around us. "It's nice to meet you," I said. Camille studied my face. "I wish we'd met sooner," she said. "We owe you an explanation." She did not lower her voice out of secrecy. She lowered it out of respect. "Lydia told us last fall that you were stepping back, that you were overwhelmed and struggling. She framed it as concern." My jaw tightened, but I stayed silent. "And then things started falling apart," Camille continued. "Vendors complained, deadlines slipped, the narrative lost cohesion. We felt it." She paused. "One of our committee members found an earlier draft of the campaign in a shared drive. The metadata showed your name, not Lydia's." I felt something steady settle in my chest. "I'm not here to start a conflict," Camille said. "I'm here because we need someone who understands the work, someone who doesn't confuse image with substance." "I'm not interested in a public dispute," I said. Camille nodded. "Neither are we. We'd like to talk, quietly." Across the room, Lydia was alone now. Her phone was in her hand, her fingers moving quickly, as if control could be restored by typing fast enough. I did not look away. I did not smile. I simply existed where I was. Later that night on the train home, my phone buzzed. "This is Grant. We need to talk." Another message followed. "Lydia is under a lot of pressure. Please don't make this harder." I read the words once, then put my phone away. I was not making anything harder. I was no longer holding it together for them. When I reached home, I stood by the window and watched the streetlights glow against the dark. Lydia's world was not collapsing. It was thinning, and that kind of loss did not announce itself. It simply became permanent. Chapter 5. I didn't end her life. I ended my silence. The absence of noise was what surprised me most. Spring arrived without drama. Snow melted, trees filled in. Life resumed its ordinary rhythm. I moved through it without the constant sense of negotiation that had once defined my days. I was no longer bracing myself for disappointment or preparing explanations no one had asked for. When I looked back at the months before Christmas, I could see the pattern clearly. How often I had confused being needed with being valued. How easily I had accepted invisibility as the costs of belonging. What followed was not revenge. It was alignment. In March, I met with Camille again. This time, the conversation was straightforward. Scope defined, credit established, authority clarified. My name appeared exactly where it belonged. No ambiguity, no backdoors. You don't minimize yourself anymore, Camille observed. I learned what it costs, I said. With Nina's guidance, I closed the remaining legal threads. Notices went out, access was revoked, ownership was clarified. No accusations, no public statements. The facts were enough. Grant Camden reached out one final time, a short message, concern dressed as civility. I did not respond. Whatever leverage he once held disappeared the moment I stopped centering it. As for Lydia, she did not vanish. She continued working, posting, attending events. But the air around her had changed. People listened differently. Questions lingered longer. Trust, once unquestioned, now required proof. Hannah pulled away in quiet ways, less appearing in posts, fewer shared moments. The cracks were not public, but they were real. Months later, I saw Lydia in a grocery store. Fluorescent lights, ordinary shelves, no audience. "Elowen," she said. "Lydia." She looked tired, not defeated, just worn down. "I didn't think it would turn out like this," she said. I waited, then answered, "I think it turned out exactly the way it was built to." She nodded. There was nothing left to say. I walked away without replaying the moment later. It did not follow me home. That night, sitting alone with a book I barely read, I realized something important. Healing was not relief. It was distance. It was the ability to remember without reopening the wound. I did not end her life. I ended my silence. I stopped mistaking endurance for virtue. I stopped giving access to people who benefited from my erasure. I learned that silence is not weakness. Silence without boundaries is. If you are listening to this and something feels uncomfortably familiar, if you have ever stayed quiet just to keep your place, I want to ask you one thing. How many times have you called it peace when it was really erasure? And what might change if you let your silence finally belong to you?